fancy gas station attendant, so you don't want her looking like that. but a fancy one. Dan, can you talk about the matching the shots and trying to find a way to join that, lighting from 2 movies ago with what you're creating here?
Roger's a huge ally of mine, and I pay a huge amount of attention to what he's telling me, and sometimes it's counter-instinctual and it's completely backwards. But I've seen him do his stuff.
Yeah, the great thing about this group of people, we've worked 5 or 6 movies together. We really, and there's a tremendous advantage, I think, sometimes in having history with somebody, because you really understand. You can use a shorthand, and you can. And Dan and I have a lot of experience together, and so the real trick was just matching that lighting every time. And Dan was very kind enough to have enough confidence in us to say, yeah, I'm going to do that, and and that's not an easy thing to do sometimes.
Was part of making it work, like setting the story in a place that was somewhat similar in terms of environment? Sometimes, and we'd had conversations about, there's a shot we want to use it exterior, but it wasn't, and Roger's like, no. And I'd say, yeah, but yes. And then he'd say, and then
no.
And then we would go back and forth. But we again, this is a relationship that I think respect each other enough so that if I'm saying this is something that needs to happen in a certain way, and you're saying this is something that we need to do in this way, we find a way to make it work. But all these things, and there were so many. And by the way, there aren't a ton of scenes that she's in. I wish, of course, that she had been with us. I wish she were here now. This would be so much more entertaining. But it would. So yes, you agree. But I will say that we did what we could with the footage that we had, and it was a million intricate decisions and discussions and trials and things. And it was again, you made it look really easy, but it was not. So after all that work, Marianne, it comes to you. And can you tell me about the challenges of putting this together and making it connect and making sure it all fits seamlessly?
Yeah, sure. Well, I will say the last time I actually was with Carrie was in the last ADR session on 7, and I got there before JJ arrived, and she took me aside and was very upset and said to me, I look terrible in this film, you have to make me look good, you have to promise you will always make me look good. And I said, Carrie, that's my job, to always make you look good, that's what I do. And so I started on this film, and JJ told me we were going to use the footage from 7. I felt so obligated to make her look good because she had asked me, and it was all I ever heard. And so, and of course, I loved her so much. So what would happen is, it wasn't only in post, because Roger would come with Pat to my room, and we'd sit there and we'd go through takes. And I had the advantage of having cut those scenes before, so I was quite familiar with her performance. And I'd read the script, and we'd kind of...
And I might interject that you think it's going to be difficult, and then it becomes, you really start working on it, and you realize just how complicated it is, because you have a shot of somebody that you're trying to integrate into a scene and have all the other actors in the same space and look the right ways and everything else. So, we had to plan this, and what we would do is Marianne and I would, JJ would give us notes, we'd try and assemble a version of that moment with storyboards, and then put it back together and say, JJ, something like this. And this was happening in the heat of the production, when we had a million things to do. But quite frankly,
this was the easiest part of the production.
Well, because then you would come and we'd do that, and then I'd pick a take ultimately, and I'd pick 3 or 4 takes, knowing which one was my favorite. Then I'd send them off to a storyboard artist in the same building and be like, can you draw out the rest of what's the other actors are going to do so I can present this to JJ? And then I'd give it back to Roger, and he'd show it to JJ, and he'd inevitably pick another take, and then we'd switch to another take, and it went back and forth until we got the perfect take, because that's how we do it.
And one of the things just to add is that you may have noticed that Billy Lord, her daughter, was in scenes with her. When we first wrote the script, we didn't have the scenes, we didn't write scenes. I didn't want to presume she would want to be in these scenes, but when she read the script, she said, please, you know, if you would, put me in some stuff with her. So that was an added emotional element to it, which was, again, on the one hand, really beautiful and sweet. On the other hand, you know,
And so brave of Billy. I mean, when Carrie is going off, the person helping her off is her daughter. In the last shot that we see Carrie before her death. And, you know, every time I see that scene, I'm just moved by Billy's bravery that she wanted to do this for her mother.
I'm sure if she was here, she would be asking what you could use her in next.